Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. I'm with Steve Starkey. He is the author. He's a producer of Forrest Gump, but he's the author of "Stupid Is as Stupid Does" um, by Steve Starkey. It's the full title, if you want to look it up and pick up a copy, is "Stupid Is as Stupid Does: The Unlikely Journey of a Producer on Forrest Gump." I was on Amazon today to pick up a copy, and there were only 10 copies left. So now there's 9. uh, so get your copy. Hopefully they replenish quickly. Okay, so I wanted to quote from Forrest Gump here. This is part of my question. My mama always said you can tell a lot about a person by their shoes, where they are going, where they have been. What can we learn from your shoes, Steve? What kind of shoes you wearing?
I'm wearing flip-flops. I live close to the beach. So I guess I've been walking on the sand and having a nice leisurely morning.
That's what happens when you're a success like Steve Starkey. When you make great movies like Forrest Gump, you get to wear flip flops and live by the beach. That's a perfect answer. I love it. Okay,
Well, in
so
Santa Barbara here where we live, you can't avoid it. It's too nice.
yeah, why would you wear shoes?
Yeah.
So the book opens with a bang. Seriously, it pulls you in right away. And there's this confrontation. You're on the lot at Paramount. It's the first screening of Forrest Gump with an audience, I believe. And I'm going to let you tell us what happens next. If you would honor us, Steve, with a reading,
I
everybody
love
would love
to.
it.
I love to read, because it sets up a little bit of the relationship that I had with the film studio at the time of making the film.
By the way, well, I'll ask this. I don't want to give it away. I hope your relationship is good with them now after the
Oh
film
yeah,
was
I mean
successful.
the book resolves with where we all came out, at best of friends. But along the way it was a fight because any way you look at it, Forrest Gump was a risky film to make. It even though it had Bob Zemeckis and had Tom Hanks, it was going to come with a pretty hefty price tag. And just because of the nature of so many different pieces that you had to film in so many places and through many time periods with wardrobe changes and hair and everything in the background. So it was not an easy decision. What put them in a difficult place was Bob actually was in position where if they turned down making the movie, he could go to Universal and make it there. So they kind of were scared to make it, but they also were scared to let it go.
Mm.
So this anxiety was something that clouded over the movie from the get-go. And so that's just a little setup of, what we were up against when we were making, decisions were being made for crazy reasons by the studio. And we were just passionate filmmakers. All we wanted to do was get the movie made that was in the screenplay. And they were trying to just think of how can we contain this thing and make it smaller and cheaper and, anything they could think of. So anyway, if so, would you like me to read a little bit from the prologue?
I would love it if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, so here we are now. We've finally put the film into a state that it can be viewed, and it's still got, temporary visual effects. We do have the songs that you heard throughout the picture in place. We had a temporary soundtrack that Alan Silvestri had provided, so you could get emotionally involved in the film. And so here we go. When I drove onto the lot of Paramount Studios in the spring of 1994, I was both excited and anxious. I was always excited to walk on the lot of any film studio. I felt privileged. But today the anxiety clouded my excitement. We were about to do the first preview screening of Forrest Gump. In addition to the filmmakers, the studio executives would be present, which only increased my anxiety. They wielded power, and in addition, we had a rather acrimonious relationship. I had watched the film for the first time a few weeks before, and I looked forward to sharing the emotional experience with others. At the same time, I was worried that the audience would not feel what I felt. Even though I had been moved by the screenplay and had similar feelings during shooting, I never expected the movie would be as powerful as it was. The director, Bob Zemeckis, had put together a film that was much bigger than what I imagined and worked on. I called Bob to tell him how proud I was to be part of it. No matter what happened, Nothing would take away that feeling that I had that day in that screening. In that sense, I felt good as I walked toward the theater. The preview was set up in the Paramount Theater. We had agreed to the screening, but requested that we forego the usual preview cards. We thought the film was playing well and had little to learn to what the audience might say on a questionnaire, which might give the studio a reason to change the film when it wasn't broken in the first place. By sitting in the audience during the screening, we would learn what we needed to learn, if anything. The studio agreed. We all secured seats toward the back of the theater, filmmakers on one side, studio executives and their marketing team on the other. The theater was small, so we were able to sense the audience reactions from where we were sitting. Tom Hanks, who had not seen the film since an early rough cut, came along for the ride. I met him in the lobby shortly after the film started and guided him to his seat in the back, where he could come and go unnoticed. The film played beautifully. The audience laughed when we expected them to, but for the most part, you could hear a pin drop. No one got up to go to the bathroom during the screening. As the final scene was winding down, I moved to where Tom was sitting. I told him it was time to go if he wished to avoid the audience. He got up and I escorted him to the lobby to say goodbye. To my surprise, standing there in the lobby were several employees from the National Research Group, a company that presents and evaluates preview screenings. The NRG personnel were armed with questionnaires and pencils to hand out to the audience at the conclusion of the film. I told them there'd been a mistake. We had decided not to have cards at the screening, so they could take off if they wished. Who asked you to come? I asked them. Sherry Lansing, they answered. More beholden to Sherry, the chair of the Paramount Pictures Motion Picture Group, than to me, they proceeded to enter the theater. I followed them in, and as I passed Bob's seat, I told him Sherry had ordered cards to be filled out. He looked up in dismay. I quickly marched down the aisle and yelled out to the audience, "There's been a mistake. You do not need to fill out the cards. Please pass your pencils and questionnaires back to the aisle." From the opposite aisle in the back of the theater, I heard Sherry shout, "Please keep your seats and fill out the questionnaire before you leave the theater." The back and forth continued for a few minutes until finally a guy almost dead center in the audience stood up and said, "I don't know what you two are arguing about because this is the best movie I've ever seen." I glanced back at Bob and saw that Jack Rapke, his agent, was escorting Bob out of the theater. They wanted no part of this. As the cards were distributed, I made my way back to the lobby and met Sherry. I thought we agreed not to have cards. I decided I wanted them, she countered. Giving into the standoff, I said, "Okay, what if we have the audience complete the cards? Then I'll take them back to the editing room. We'll read them first and then send them back to the studio." She nodded in agreement. A short time later, as I was heading out of the theater, I was confronted by Sherry and her team, which included Jonathan Dolgen, who was attending his first preview as the new chairman of Viacom Entertainment. Sherry stopped me in my tracks, put her face into mine, and said, "One day you will learn that you do not work for Bob Zemeckis. You work for me and Paramount Pictures." With that, I left, placed the cards safely in the trunk of my car. I met up with Bob and told him the outcome. We should get back to our offices, regroup. We know the cards wouldn't lie. We had a wonderful film on our hand. When I got in the car, I sat there in shock. What had I done? I've been yelling at the head of the studio, and she was yelling back at me. This is crazy. The guy in the audience was right. We had a wonderful film on our hands, so what were we screaming about? After everything I'd been through on the film, I should not have been surprised it came to this. Throughout the making of the movie, I had come to represent all the studio's fears and all the budget overages. I'd been the one responsible for all the problems. But how did it happen? As with all good tales, it's best to start at the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. That was Steve Starkey.
I think the first time I've read a book out loud since I was in grammar school.
Stupid is as stupid does. That was a reading, a rare reading, it sounds like, from Steve Starkey. He's the author of Stupid Is as Stupid Does, The Unlikely Journey of a Producer on Forrest Gump. And wow, it gave me chills the second time when you read it, because I'm imagining that scene. And Sherry had a reputation as a tough studio head, didn't she? I mean, she was around town. People were scared of her. People were scared of her.
The funny thing is that just a few weeks prior, we screened the movie for Sherry and her two lieutenants, John Goldwyn and Michelle Manning. And I attended the screening. I didn't go in with them, but I was waiting at the door. And when they came out, I mean, you could tell they were all been crying. And a very emotional side to otherwise a very, a tough studio executive. And so it really showed me the vulnerable, emotional, film-loving side of Sherry Lansing and the others that she worked with. And although they had to do their job and be tough on the filmmakers and try to keep these budgets, everything, as tight as they could, they still loved movies. And but despite the fact they were emotional and loved the movie, they wanted to preview the film because they were still not sure. And so then that led into that preview screening. It's like, when do you just trust yourself that what you write, other people are going to love too? But
that probably had more to do with those positions as those studio heads. I mean, they've changed over, don't they? Every couple of years, the turnover is high, and it's a high pressure job. The film, she knew it was good, but she had to be told as well, just because that's that where you're at.
It comes with the territory, I guess.
Comes with the territory. Well, before we go to break here for our last break, thank you for reading, by the way, Forrest. That was great. Sure. As I said earlier, when I went to USC Film School around 2000, on my very first day of class, my instructor said to us, very first day, very first class, he says, opened the class in this semester like this. He says, a good film is a happy mistake. Do you believe that?
I think that there are happy mistakes that occur during the making of a movie. I don't think that, that I say a happy mistake. Look, there's so much hard work and so much planning and so much creative input that that goes into it from the writing of the script, that all the way on, to every decision, every location, everything that's designed, the way the camera's set up, how it's directed by the director, that what the actors are doing. That when I think of like a happy mistake, there is serendipity and there are mistakes that contribute to making scenes or turning things in a way that were unexpected and often better. But for the most part, when you start out with a script, I mean, Bob, he adheres to that screenplay. It tells him what he's thinking and what he's going to do. And he works very hard on it with the writer. And all of us use that as our Bible. So there are no mistakes in that sense. But serendipity does come along. Beautiful light. You put Tom Hanks, running through Monument Valley at the end of the run. And how is the sun going to rise? And what is going to present itself? Well, it was probably the most beautiful sunrise I've ever seen in my life. Now, I couldn't have, created. Well, now, today, you probably can take the sunrise in Forrest Gump and stick it in the background of another movie. But in those days, you had to do it all in the camera. We all had to stand there in the dark at dawn, waiting for the sun to come up and going, I wonder what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I thought that comment was, that's too trivial. I mean, it trivializes the whole process. And, there's a lot, you put in so much hard work and so many, as you said, sometimes it's luck, but it's a lot of preparation and getting ahead of, the film. He also told us that after he was finished with us, we would never like film again. So that kind of tells you the type of professor. I still love film.
Maybe he was a misleading professor.
Yes, he was. Okay, so let's take our final break. I did want to say that you dedicated the book to Artie Schmidt,
yes,
who made his last cut on August 5th of 2023. What was his last cut? What a great editor he is.
Well, the last cut I meant, that's when he passed.
Oh, okay.
Okay. It's just a way of describing that he contributed his, whatever his last act, for us. And, Artie, I worked with, starting on Rodger Rabbit through the two Back to the Futures, my entire career with Bob until the very end of it, Artie was the film editor. And he often attributes the fact that I became a producer because of him. And the reason he says this is when I was aspiring to be a film editor, having been assistant editor on the Star Wars movies and done a little documentary making of movies, I was now at Amblin working on the making of Indiana Jones. And sure enough, this picture called Back to the Future comes up looking for a second editor. And I thought, my God, this is my chance, you know? So I go and interview with Artie Schmidt. And lo and behold, I got turned down. And he said later, when we're working together on Roger, he said, now look, Steve, just imagine if I had hired you as the second editor on Back to the Future, you never would have become a producer. So it's all because of me that you became a film producer.
Oh, wow.
I just love Artie.
Mm. Well, what a beautiful dedication. Okay, we're going to take a break here. Steve, I'm with Steve Starkey. Stupid is as Stupid Does, the new book, The Unlikely Journey of a Producer on Forrest Gump. You want to check this out. If you love film and you love Forrest Gump, bonus. This is behind the scenes by the producer, Steve Starkey. It's got a foreword by Tom Hanks. And we'll be right back. You can get it anywhere you get your books.